Did y'all have a chance to read beforehand?
Yeah.
It got kind of repetitive, didn't it?
It did.
It does.
The Pharaoh didn't get it. And the patience, it just also shows you the patience of God.
Yes, that's right. No doubt about that. So we are on to Exodus 8, and we'll do 9 and 10 as well today. Does someone want to read verses 1 through 7?
I will.
Okay.
Then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord says. Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace, and your bedroom, and onto your bed, into the of your officials, and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all your officials. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came and covered the land. But the magicians did the same things by their secret arts. They also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt.
Thank you. I apologize for my sneezing. I'm glad I've got a mask. I promise I'm not sick. Just a rare little thing. But yeah, we see in this selection of verses that Kieran just read that there's this familiar format of a charge and a warning to Pharaoh, declaring to Moses what he is to do with Pharaoh, and then God through Moses, through Aaron, enacting the wonder, and then we see it matched by the magicians. The frogs represent a lot more than just nuisance. They represent creatures who carry disease, filth, and smell. And it also cemented that this plague is inescapable. It is everywhere. You can't avoid it. And, so long to say that it's in the ovens and the kneading bowls. They're everywhere. And so we can only imagine what that might be like to experience. Any thoughts or questions on that?
It was just creepy.
Yeah, definitely so. I'll read 8 through 15. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, pray to the Lord to take away the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. Moses said to Pharaoh, kindly tell me when I am to pray for you and for your officials and for your people, that the frogs may be removed from you and your houses and be left only in the Nile. And he said, tomorrow. Moses said, as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs shall leave you and your houses and your officials and your people. They shall be left only in the Nile. Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried out to the Lord concerning the frogs that he had brought upon Pharaoh. And the Lord did as Moses requested. The frogs died in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields, and they gathered them together in heaps. The land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was a respite, he hardened his heart and would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. So this is a real crisis in Egypt because of the frogs. Pharaoh's resistance is now really causing havoc upon his own people. His own stubbornness is really causing them discomfort and nuisance. We also see Pharaoh truly acknowledge this Yahweh may be real and worthy of authority. Yahweh can do what he cannot do. He asked Moses to go and pray to the Lord that would take the plague away. And we see him dangle the idea of the Israelites going away to sacrifice. When shall I pray? From Moses to Pharaoh, seems to be a toying reply to Pharaoh's request. Like, I'm the one that holds the power in this scenario, Pharaoh. So when should I pray to God for this to be relieved? And it's a belief that he holds the power in this situation and not Pharaoh. We see Moses cry out for the frogs to be removed, and this mirrors a similar cry from the slaves earlier in Exodus. And this creates the meaning that no matter who is suffering, God will work to soothe that suffering. So Moses is essentially kind of crying out on behalf of the Egyptians, and God is honoring hearing that cry to relieve that. And we also see that while the Egyptians could bring the frogs up in a similar way to Yahweh, they don't have the power to remove them. And so that's kind of the clinch pin of God and God's power being wielded over Egypt. Any questions about the frogs or the interaction? Starting to see Pharaoh, and we'll see this repeated as you read. And you can debate in your own minds whether you think that Pharaoh is really believing that God is the one in power and authority and is trying to obey, or is Pharaoh just using that as a clever way to try to get out of and have the plagues removed, but not do what God is actually asking to happen. So that will continue. Let's see, Francis, would you read verses 16 through 19?
Yes. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, so that it may become gnats throughout the whole land of Egypt." And they did so. Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff and struck the dust of the earth, and gnats came on humans and animals alike. All the dust of the earth turned into gnats throughout the whole land of Egypt. The magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, but they could not. There were gnats on both animals, humans and animals. And the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said.
Thank you. The plague of gnats follows immediately after the frogs. There's no real break. And it seems to be as a response to Pharaoh's refusal of letting the Israelites go from the previous plague. The gnats cover everything. And Terence Freheim, a scholar, talks about how when the dust is brought up and it becomes gnats, now that's a connection point to another phrase about dust. Can y'all think of when dust is used elsewhere in the Bible?
Dust to dust.
Yeah. God forms man and woman out of the dust of the earth, humankind out of the dust. And so it's to say that another way of giving a symbol that God is the one who creates and even can create gnats out of dust. And it's also kind of a way to saying, like, you can imagine Egypt dusty, and you can imagine that as much dust covers Egypt, that's also covering everything else with gnats. And so it's really emphasizing kind of this suffocating way that they're really plagued. I mean, y'all have been in a field where you've seen those little gnats dancing around. Now imagine it's everywhere. You can't run away or swat them. They're just there. You can't get rid of it. So it's another way of God trying to create this power changing, and as Francis read, the magicians were not able to mimic this wonder. And we see here a pretty incredible thing. It also tells us Pharaoh will continue to isolate himself in his own stubbornness, as his own advisors say, this is the finger of God. So even his own people that are giving him advice are saying, look, this clearly is a very powerful God, and you should probably do what he asks. Pharaoh is alone in his refusal to let the Israelites go. Any thoughts or comments on the gnats?
My only thought of the gnats was because he said he did create them from dust. And you talk about how dusty Egypt is, but dust is everywhere all the time.
Yeah,
There's no getting away from it even today. So.
right. That's exactly right. Yeah. These plagues kind of allow us to think about it in our own imagination with how difficult it would be to experience something like that. And this is also something that you might think about is in these plagues, it doesn't necessarily say outright that these things go away. It's implied that when Pharaoh pleads with Moses to do so, that everything kind of goes up. I mean, we saw the frogs are kind of dealt with, but we don't really hear much about what happened with the gnats. And if someone was just reading, they might presume, well, there's a whole bunch of gnats, and then there's a whole bunch of flies, and then and you wonder, well, wouldn't it have been funny if they did the gnats and the flies, and then they did the frogs, and the frogs can eat all of the, but no, that's not the way this works.
But Moses had to pray to God.
Yeah.
For this plague to be removed.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that during all of this is the first time that the magicians can't do anything.
Yeah. This is a new trick they don't know. Let's continue. I'll read verse 20 through 32 on the plague of flies. Then the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh as he goes out to the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go so that they may worship me. For if you will not let me go, I will not send swarms of flies on you, your officials, and your people, and into your houses. And the houses of the Egyptians shall be filled with swarms of flies, so also the land where they live. But on that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people live, so that no swarms of flies shall be there. That you may know that I am the Lord, am in this land. Thus I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This sign shall appear tomorrow. The Lord did so, and a great swarm of flies came into the house of Pharaoh, and into his officials' houses, and all Egypt, the land was ruined because of the flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, go, sacrifice to your God within the land. But Moses said it would not be right to do so, for the sacrifices that we offer to the Lord our God are offensive to the Egyptians. If we offer in the sight of the Egyptians sacrifices that are offensive to them, will they not stone us? We must go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he commands us. So Pharaoh said, I will let you go to sacrifice the Lord your God in the wilderness, provided you do not go very far away. Pray for me. Then Moses said, as soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord that the swarm of flies may depart tomorrow from Pharaoh, from his officials, and from his people. Only do not let Pharaoh again deal falsely by not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. And the Lord did what Moses asked. He removed the swarm of flies from Pharaoh, from his officials, from his people. Not one remained, but Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also, and would not let the people go. The plague of flies is distinct because Moses and Aaron are somewhat diminished in the narrative. It's mainly God speaking and God acting. And while a command is given to Moses, there is not the typical command of Moses to Pharaoh. The actual plague is quick and destructive. We see Pharaoh budge and be willing to let them pray and sacrifice, but they must do so in the land. This seems to be a last clever attempt at Pharaoh to stop the plagues, but keep the label. Moses relents. Negotiation is going up, but not is about going away, but not too far. And Pharaoh agrees and asks for Moses to pray to Yahweh for Pharaoh in this shocking moment. I mean, this is pretty big. But this seems to be a last bit of trickery. As Moses does, we see the alleviation of the Egyptians before the removal of the oppressed Israelites. So it's almost as if, the plague goes away and then Pharaoh's heart is hardened, instead of, okay, everybody can go and then I will stop the flies. So it seems like Pharaoh is trying to use every kind of clever way of arguing to get out of having to free the Egyptians. Any thoughts on that?
Well, he tells Moses, you can go, but you can't go far away.
Yeah.
So,
And then even that's not
even that doesn't-
what God wanted. God wanted a 3 days journey. Because in Pharaoh's mind, if they're going a 3 days journey, well, maybe that means they're never coming back. And then his whole world is turned upside down. So there's a lot of power pulling back and forth, but in the end, nothing has changed in terms of who is really in control in the story, and that is God. And it seems to me that we can kind of imagine that as Pharaoh's heart continues to get hardened, he's made a fool of, because everybody is probably like, okay, just let him go. This is enough. We'll figure something else out. Let's just move on from this. Can I get someone to read the livestock? That's verse 1 through 7 of chapter 9. Okay.
Then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say to him, this is what the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, and continue to hold them back, the hand of the Lord will bring a terrible plague on your livestock in the field, on your horses, donkeys, and camels, and on your cattle, sheep, and goats. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and that of Egypt, so that no animal belonging to the Israelites will die. The Lord set a time and said, tomorrow the Lord will do this in the land. And the next day the Lord did it. All the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died. Pharaoh investigated and found that not even one of the animals of the Israelites had died. Yet his heart was unyielding, and he would not let the people go.
Thank you. The plague of pestilence showcases Yahweh's ability to make distinctions in the plagues God does. So we see the pestilence is placed upon the Egyptian livestock, but not on the slaves' camps of the Israelites. And that showcases even more power to be able not just one swoop do something, but to have a separation. But, imagine all of their livestock sick and dying, and so what does that do? that leaves them without meat. And the only thing else they would have to eat would be grains or that kind of thing. So their food supply is very limited. And, thinking about the rich and the poor, and just in our own modern society, lots of us, we just free will go grab some meat and we have some, but it didn't used to be that way. If you had a farm, you had to tend to your livestock, you had to raise them and make sure that they produced children, so that maybe one day you do slaughter the cow or some kind of livestock animal, but it also produces milk and all other sorts of things. And it may be that this is showing kind of a wealth disparity, that the livestock that the Egyptians enjoyed was kind of lavish, whereas the livestock the slaves used, they are smart about how to use all of the animal as long as they can. So that kind of points out that they have to rely upon those ways in which to raise, in which the Egyptians don't really know how to do that. Pharaoh, of course, has lost all power. He's grasping to his ego and whatever he can do to maintain power, and his heart is hardened again. Any other thoughts about the livestock? It's kind of one after the other.
It seems like God is doing a crescendo. He's building up, making everything worse, and then he lowers the boom and says, "The Israelites are not going to suffer like this."
Yeah,
So,
more and more dramatic.
If that doesn't make a believer out of you, what is?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it continues this theme of building. You're right.
Well, this is the first time too that I noticed that it said the Lord set a time.
Oh, yeah.
He said it'll happen tomorrow, which would have given the Pharaoh time to even reconsider.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it still didn't. That's a good point. Yeah, some of the plagues seem to be immediate, and this one in particular is given time. Let's see. Was someone read about boils, verse 8 through 12?
I will.
Okay.
Then the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, take handfuls of soot from the kiln, and let Moses throw it in the air in the sight of Pharaoh. It shall become fine dust over all the land of Egypt, and shall cause festering boils on humans and animals throughout the whole land of Egypt. So they took soot from the kiln, and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses threw it in the air, and it caused festering boils on humans and animals. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils afflicted the magicians as well as all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses.
Thank you very much. Now, this showcases kind of one of the strange things about the book of Exodus that can kind of have our minds kind of going, wait a minute, what? If you read the previous plague, you notice that with the pestilence, it says all their livestock died, the Egyptians' livestock. And here it's saying humans and animals have boils. Now, maybe there are some animals that they wouldn't clarify as livestock. But we'll kind of continue to bump up against that, where all of a sudden they kind of have animals again. And so, because there's this separation again from that happening to the Egyptians and not the Israelites, right?
But you could also say purchase animals from the Israelites and start over.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, you may be right. Well, and maybe not even purchase, maybe just steal. But yeah, you're exactly right. That could be very well true. I like that point. Thank you. The plague of boils seems to be purely a punishment for Pharaoh's refusal and disobedience. In this plague, there is no speech about letting people go, or even a warning. It's just done. The plague is just scripted by God to Moses and Aaron, and they tell it, and this is what happens. And like all the others, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. So out of all of them, this seems to be the one that's kind of like a punishment. There's not a long discourse with Pharaoh about you can go out or negotiating about when they can leave, and then he reneges on the deal. But it's causing frustration around the whole land of Egypt with all that has happened. So his own people are probably beginning to turn on him and saying, "What is happening? What are you doing? Stop this. Do whatever you have to do to not have this be a problem." Any other thoughts on that plague?
Another gross one.
What's that?
Another gross plague.
Yeah, another gross one. You're exactly right. Let's see, I'll read 13 through 26. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Rise early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, the God of my Hebrews, let my people go so that they may worship me. For this time I will send all my plagues upon you, yourself, and upon your officials, and upon your people, so that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For by now I could have stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth. But this is why I've let you live, to show you my power, and to make my name resound through all the earth. You are still exalting yourself against my people, and you will not let them go. Tomorrow at this time I will cause the heaviest hail to fall that has ever fallen in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Send therefore and have your livestock and everything that you have in the open field brought to a secure place. Every human or animal that is in the open field and is not brought into shelter will die when the hail comes down upon them." Those officials of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried their slaves and livestock off to a secure place. Those who did not regard the word of the Lord left their slaves and livestock in the open field. The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, so that hail may fall on the whole land of Egypt, on humans and animals and all the plants of the field in the land of Egypt." Then Moses stretched out his staff toward heaven. The Lord sent thunder and hail and fire came down on the earth, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. There was hail and fire flashing continually in the midst of it, such heavy hail as had never been fallen in the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck down everything that was in the open field throughout all the land of Egypt, both human and animal. The hail also struck down all the plants in the field and shattered every tree in the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were, there was no hail. So, this is a much longer, exhortation about this plague, lots of descriptive language. The plague of the hailstorm is made dramatic by God, declaring plagues will be poured out upon Pharaoh and his house, and essentially saying, "I could just kill you." As he says, "I could just bring a pestilence upon your people." But what I truly want is for you to know that I am God and that I hold all the power. That's from verses 16, verse 16 kind of shares that, where this continues as a major theme of Exodus that we've kind of talked about before, that this is a big PR exercise, public relations exercise for God's name to be spread wide and made known throughout the world. So all that God is doing the plagues and all of the freeing of the Israelites is not just done for their freedom, but also to make the name of Yahweh known throughout the world. This is also a claim that Yahweh is not like the other gods who are known and believed at this time, because those lesser gods would fail at wonders or could be bought off from exerting their power. So there was a wide belief about all different kinds of gods at this time. And here, with this great flood of power, with this hailstorm, is signifying that Yahweh cannot be bought off. Yahweh cannot be, if God chooses to do something and promises to do something, then that cannot be negotiated to something else. The hail is sent not to really destroy, but more as a sign to Pharaoh. And there was a warning for people to find shelter. So that's a kind of a sign that, there is an out given, that if those that obey and understand and believe this power that God has, and if they truly take it seriously, and you would hope by now those people would, they get shelter. And it does mention left their slaves and livestock in the open field. Now, I'm not so certain if that means Israelite slaves in the open field, or if they have slaves from other nations also. Could be both. Could be a situation where, due to the nature of how slavery works, that they're just trapped in that horrible situation. We also see this, I'm sure y'all will get this very quick, y'all are smart. The fire flashing. What's fire flashing? In the midst of a storm, what is fire? Lightning, yeah. Yeah, that's how they would have described what lightning was. And so there's this just incredible storm of hail and lightning and thunder. And it's showing God's power over all of that.
But it's also showing, I think God is trying to show mercy too.
Yeah.
By allowing them to shelter their
Yes,
slaves,
absolutely.
their slaves.
Yeah, no doubt. Giving that warning is to try and help people get to safety, to avoid getting hit or hurt.
He's giving them a choice to become a follower
Yeah,
or a disruptor, I guess.
that's exactly right. Yeah. And so that would mean then that if they take God's word and take shelter, and then they are safe, and if their trust is now in Yahweh and not in Pharaoh, well, there you go. That the name of Yahweh is going to be spread more, and more will have come to faith through that, and more of the same description. Pharaoh will kind of be undermined by all of what happens. Let's see. How about someone read 27 through 35? Okay.
Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. This time I have sinned, he said to them. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Pray to the Lord, for we have had enough thunder and hail. I will let you go. You don't have to stay any longer. Moses replied, when I have gone out of the city, I will spread out my hands in prayer to the Lord. The thunder will stop and there will be no more hail, so you may know that the earth is in the Lord's. But I know that you and your officials still did not fear the Lord. The flax and barley were destroyed since the barley had headed out and the flax was in bloom. The wheat and the spelt, however, were not destroyed because they ripened later. Then Moses left Pharaoh and went out of the city. He spread out his hands toward the Lord. The thunder and hail stopped, and the rain no longer poured down on the land. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunder had stopped, he sinned again. He and his officials hardened their hearts. So Pharaoh's heart was hard and would not let the Israelites go, just as the Lord had said through Moses.
Thank you. We see a dramatic statement from Pharaoh that he has sinned and that he and his people are wicked. This is made not that Pharaoh has come to faith or belief, but I think most people would say that it's just made for the hail to stop. And instead of an authentic belief about God. Pharaoh is clearly powerless in this scenario, and seemingly the one who can stop the hail is Yahweh, and yet Pharaoh's heart is hardened all the same. We go back to that debate about how Pharaoh's heart is hardened, and the understanding of if it's just Pharaoh's stubbornness that is maintained because he doesn't want to believe all that is happening, or if it's God literally kind of placing these thoughts and these motives and actions in Pharaoh. But it does seem like it lends to the second one, where there seems to be this attempt by God to kind of keep Pharaoh in motion. So it might be safe to say that the first few plagues, Pharaoh hardened his own heart and is still not budging. So now God is going to use that hardened heart that Pharaoh has, and it's going to lock him in to what he has been stuck in for so long, and truly show him what that is going to cause, which is these repeated and more intense plagues as each go on. Any thoughts about that? So we have the plague of locusts. Let's see. Someone read verses 1 through 11.
Okay. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his officials, in order that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I have made fools of the Egyptians and what signs I have done among them, so that you may know that I am the Lord." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "Thus says the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, so that they may worship me. For if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country. They shall cover the surface of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. They shall devour the last remnant left you after the hail, and they shall devour every tree of yours that grows in the field. They shall fill your houses and the houses of all your officials and of all the Egyptians, something that neither your parents nor your grandparents have seen, from the day they came on earth to this day. Then he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Pharaoh's officials said to him, "How long shall this fellow be a snare to us? Let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. Do you not yet understand that Egypt is ruined?" So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, "Go worship the Lord your God. But which ones are to go?" Moses said, "We will go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters and with our flocks and herds, because we have heard the Lord's festival to celebrate." He said to them, "The Lord indeed will be with you, if ever I would let your little ones go with you. Plainly, you have some evil purpose in mind. No, never. Your men may go and worship the Lord, for that is what you are asking." And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence.
Wow, okay. But Walter Brueggemann, who is a big scholar, notes that by the 10th chapter, a hearing of the plague of locusts, that to many readers it may have gotten very repetitive, is what we joked about earlier. And there is a desire to skip over and maybe rush through. Maybe it has gotten being about boring or being repetitive. And that is when we must try and read from the shoes of the Hebrew slaves who had endured so much oppression. So, in doing so, if we read from the vantage point of someone who was in oppression trying to endure, and then you have this God that performs all these wonders, if you try to take it in from that perspective, then it becomes more of a witness about what God is willing to do for those under oppressive power, and if one day we were. Also, God is continuing the plagues and propping up Pharaoh's heart on purpose to help the Israelites truly remember all God did to showcase power. So it does seem very explicit in this passage, the beginning of chapter 10, that this is something that God is intentionally doing. We see God making a fool out of Pharaoh by his heart being hardened and resisting letting the Israelites go. And it's kind of an obvious thing that Pharaoh should do by now. Well, just let them go. All of this has happened, and all of this is devastating. And all of this is wreaking havoc on Egypt, but he doesn't. So that's kind of where we are. Let me read the last few. Yeah.
It seems that Pharaoh is saying, the men can go, but your little ones can't go.
Right.
Is that what he's saying?
That's right. And that seems to be very, that would be an obvious thing that Moses would never agree to, because all that is saying, well, I'll at least have your children that I can enslave and keep and maintain, and that's also ironic, since he was wanting to kill them in the first place, right? Well, the previous king, to eliminate the threat of the numerous Israelites that were being born. But yeah, you're right, and
it's like holding them hostage.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then you're holding actually the men hostage as well, because even if they go,
they're going to come back.
They will still try to
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah.
There will still be a relationship there.
Yeah, and so we can see that there's this building tension, not only between God and Pharaoh with these plagues, but Moses and Pharaoh and their back and forth negotiations. And Moses is certainly frustrated by the idea about leaving the children. We see on in the further verses that Pharaoh responds with an answer that he knows will be refused, to leave the children here. So he knows that they won't go if he says. So this is just another strategy and clever trick to delay their leaving. But all it does is create more turmoil. Let's see, let me read the last few verses here. The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt so that the locusts may come upon it and eat every plant in the land, all that the hail has left." So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When morning came, the east wind brought the locusts. Locusts came upon all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt. Such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been seen before, nor ever shall be seen again. They covered the surface of the whole land, so the land was black. And they ate all the plants in the land, all the fruits of the trees the hail had left. Nothing green was left, no tree, no plant in the field, in all the lands of Egypt. Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Do forgive my sin just this once, and pray to the Lord your God that at least he remove this deadly thing from me." So he went out from Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord. The Lord changed the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the country of Egypt, for the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go. So you see what has been happening to Egypt. Their livestock has largely been eliminated. Their people have kind of been terrorized in certain ways with what has happened. And we see here with the hail and now the locusts that all of their produce and all of their grains is now gone. So we can see that this symbolically says that Egypt is broken. There's no food. And so that's kind of building up, not just to the ninth plague, but to the last plague, which lets the Israelites go free. So it's a massive thing, and I think the locusts one is the one people remember the most because we've seen kind of the visuals of that in movies and TV, and swarms of locusts taking over and ridding crops. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I think like with the locusts, like you said, that's the most visual for us, and plus there have been locusts in the United States, like during the Dust Bowl time that really wiped out things, and that, it was almost like a similar type situation. So I think we can identify with that.
Yeah, I think
It kind of reminds me of the farmers and their hay fields. The army worms. They knew, they could tell that the army worms were coming because they were in one area, and the farmers would try to rush and get their hay cut so that the worms wouldn't eat the cut hay before it got bad.
Right. It's something we can identify with and understand. And that's exactly also what the next plague we could understand. Francis, would you read the last?
Okay, the ninth plague. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, so that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was dense darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. People could not see one another, and for 3 days they could not move from where they were, but all the Israelites had light where they lived. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship the Lord. Only your flocks and your herds shall remain behind. Even your children may go with you." But Moses said, "You must let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings to sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also must go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind, for we must choose some of them for the worship of the Lord our God, and we will not know what to use to worship the Lord until we arrive there. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was unwilling to let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, "Get away from me. Take care that you do not see my face again. For on the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses said, "Just as you say, I will never see your face again."
Okay, so things have gotten very, very intense, and they're now at just right below the boiling point of everything. The plague of darkness showcases God thwarting the power of the sun god Ra. That's on display here in this passage. And having all of Egypt in darkness and the Israelites in light mocks those who put their faith in Ra, or at least tells them that God is more powerful than Ra. This plague also must be understood as to what darkness meant back then, as many today still hold. I mean, darkness is mysterious. It's often a symbol of evil or danger. And, you know, you hear the phrase, nothing good happens after midnight. And that was true back then, I'm sure, as well. It showed that to go against Yahweh is to risk danger and wrath. Continuing, we see Moses and Pharaoh negotiate, with Pharaoh being okay with children leaving, but that herds and cattle must stay. Moses rejects this lower price of negotiation because they are needed for sacrifice. Pharaoh is enraged by Moses' refusal and sends him away, banning him from his courts, and that leaves us at a very high pressure point of the narrative building to the final plague. So you can just think that, and you can kind of think that this darkness starts in midday. Can't you just see that? Some even speculate, well, maybe it was an eclipse that coincided with Moses saying this to Pharaoh, and the darkness kind of covered. But here in the text, it's almost an oppressive darkness, an ominous darkness. And it just seems to showcase that the one who has power is the one that's brought these plagues, and the darkness certainly sends kind of this foreshadowing of death of the first born plague that's going to come. Other thoughts or questions about the darkness plague or any of the other plagues? One after another after another. Kind of the same thing, but they're all very interesting.
But I just don't know why God always hardened Pharaoh's heart. And he did it, obviously God did it deliberately. He knew, I guess he knew that there will be some people who will never accept.
True. I think that's one of the main reasons. It could also be that it says that in certain spots it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but perhaps Pharaoh's heart was already hard, and
he wouldn't change.
it's hard for any king to want to admit that there's a better king, or
I wonder if it's like kind of comparing that to Satan. Satan will never change.
Yeah. Well, read here, God also wants to use that as a way of telling the Israelites, look, all these things are happening because of all that's been done to you. And so the Egyptians and Pharaoh are going to get their retribution. And not just okay, freedom, but there's a price for all of the pain that they've brought upon the Israelites. So. Well, I think next week we do the final plague and Passover, so that'll be exciting to go over all that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Absolutely. So let us close with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the blessing of this day. We recognize you as the source of life and power that can work through us to do extraordinary things. We ask that you would help us through our day and our week, and may we be bold to seek you, obey you, and follow your way. Amen.